So today we are going to start with our next chapter, that is your chapter number 3, and that is virtualization. So topics which we are going to look into here is first introduction, that what do you mean by virtualization. Second, what are the characteristics of virtualized environments. Third, taxonomy of virtualization technique. Fourth, virtualization and cloud computing. Fifth, pros and cons of virtualization. Sixth, we are going to see some technological examples with the concept of virtualization applied there. So the first will be your logical network parameter. Second, virtual server. Third, cloud storage. Fourth, cloud usage monitor. Fifth, resource replication. Sixth, ready-made environment. So let's begin now. So the first we are going to start that what do you mean by virtualization? Because we are starting with the topic which says virtualization. So first we should know what do you mean by virtualization before we go much in detail. So if I talk about virtualization in very simple words, I have given the definition. You can see over your screen. It is a creation of virtual version rather than actual version of something. Okay, so that virtual version can be your operating system, can be your server, can be your storage devices or network resources. Anything which you don't want to work on actual version, but you're creating a virtual version of it, and then you are using it. That is called as virtualization. Okay, so basically virtualization does what? It simulates the software, it uses some hardware functionality, and it creates the virtual system. Okay, mostly if I talk about IT organization, they don't go for a physical connection, or they don't go for a physical version. They usually work with the virtualization, and that is the virtual systems are there where you will install your VMware, and you can operate multiple operating systems into that environment. Okay, so in virtualization you will always have more than one virtual system, and there will be many applications which will run on that single server. Okay, so one of the best benefits of virtualization is it gives you greater efficiency, and it actually helps you to grow your economies of scale. Means what? You can easily add more resources, you can easily add more software, you can easily work with it. So that is all about your virtualization. So always remember, in very simple words, if I talk about virtualization, usually we there are types of virtualization which we are going to look into. But remember one thing: virtualization is nothing but you are going to create a virtual version of anything rather than you are using something actually it is. Okay, because when you're going for a physical version, it will take a lot of time. You need to update it, and then you cannot provide remote services. For providing remote services, you need to create a virtual environment, you create a virtual version, and that is why you use virtualization. Okay, most commonly we go for an operating system virtualization that will allow your softwares, your hardwares to run on multiple operating systems, or you can say at the same point of time. So that is all about your virtualization. So the next topic here says what are the types of virtualization? Okay. So if I talk about virtualization, broad categories or broad types, it is of two. First is hardware virtualization and second is software virtualization. Okay. So when I talk about hardware virtualization, it is subcategorized into three: full virtualization, para virtualization, and partial virtualization. We are going to look each of them in detail in the upcoming topics, or so don't worry about it. Next, we have the software virtualization. The software virtualization is again categorized into three: operating system virtualization, server virtualization, and storage virtualization. Always remember one thing here, that if I talk about hardware virtualization, okay, so here in this case, your hardware resources are going to be virtualized. So you can remote them as a virtual service. Okay. If I talk about software virtualization, here you are going to use software virtual resources or software version of your resources. That is your software virtualization. So over your screen you can see the diagram. First you have a hardware virtualization host, then you have VMM, that is virtual machine management or manager, which helps you to do this virtual management, that how your hardware and other softwares can be virtualized together and the services can be given. And then you have your operating system, that your best operating system using your VMware, your software, all the applications are running over it. Okay, so in virtualization everything is going to be virtualized layer by layer: the hardware layer, then your virtual machine management, and then your guest operating systems and all your application software.
So these are the two broad categories of virtualization, hardware and software, and under each of them there are these three subcategories. In virtualization, one of the most important element which is there, or you can say a form of virtualization, usually in cloud hosting, if you talk about, is hypervisors. Okay, so first you have to understand that what are hypervisors actually are. Okay, so if I talk about hypervisor, it is again a form of virtualization software, and mostly whenever you're providing any cloud services or you're providing any cloud hosting, we usually use this. Okay, so basically what they do, this hypervisors will divide, they will do the allocation of resources on the hardware whatever you want as per your choice, whatever hardware you have selected. Okay, so all the partitioning, your extra isolation, your abstraction, everything will be handled by the hypervisors, and usually we call it as virtualization hypervisors. Okay, so hypervisors in other word is an hardware virtualization technique which can also allow multiple guest operating systems to run on a single host at the same time. Okay, so hypervisors are called as virtualization hypervisors. They are also called as hardware virtualization, which is managed and done by your techniques or your softwares, you can say. Then you also called as VMM, that is virtual machine manager. Okay, so the computer on which hypervisor runs, or you can say one or more virtual machines which are running, usually called as host machine, because actual your execution, actual your working is starting from that host machine, from where you are creating the virtual services or virtual, you can say, platforms from that. So usually that is called as host machine, and each virtual machine which is created using that host machine is called as a guest machine. Okay, so hypervisor is something which is very much important, which will help you to divide, it will help you to allocate the resources, it will help you to divide the pieces of hardware, that which hardware will be required by what platform, how it is going to be managed, everything is done by the hypervisors. So here whenever you are using hypervisors with virtualization, it is called as virtualization hypervisors. When you are using hardware virtualization technique, then with the hypervisors which is managed, usually called as hypervisor hardware virtualization. Okay, it is also called as VMM, because you are using your virtual machine managers which are doing you this managing, which are helping you to do this all everything at a single point of time. That is called as VMM. Okay, and the computer from where your hypervisor runs, which is your actual host machine, the main computer from where you have started creating the virtual resources or virtualization, usually called as host machine, and the virtual versions which you are creating, that is usually called as guest machine, because that is something, that guest machine is something which is going to be.
So when I talk about hypervisor, it will treat your CPU, it will treat your memory and storage all as a pool, okay, which can be reallocated between your existing guest or to the new virtual machines. So always remember, first you need a host machine. A host machine is nothing but a main computer from where you're going to create the virtual services, or you can say virtualization, where you are going to create that you need, that is your host machine. Okay, and then after that, every virtualization which you are creating, or all the virtual services which you are creating out of that host machine, is called as guest machine. Okay, so in case of hypervisors, the hypervisor will treat your CPUs, your memories, your storages, everything is going to be treated, and they can be easily reallocated between your existing guest, or you can say many virtual machines together, which you're going to create as a guest machines in the future. Okay, so basically hypervisor does what, it will presents your guest operating system with a virtual operating platform, and then it is going to manage the entire working. So just the way you have your actual system, the same replica you're going to create on the version side. Okay, you're going to create a virtualization, a virtual version of the same actual system. Okay, but only the thing is, like, everything is going to be your virtualized. Your hardware is going to be virtualized, your operating system will be virtualized, the applications which you're going to run is going to be virtualized. Okay, so example I've given, like Linux, your Windows and Mac operating system, all can be run on the single machine if you're going for a virtualization. If you're not going for the virtualization, as we know, this all operating system cannot be integrated together. Okay, because all of them have their different working. But if you are using virtualization of the operating system, you can use this operating system platforms together, and that also on just a single physical machine. All you have to do, you have to just create the virtualized operating system. You have to create different VMwares, and whatever you want, that whatever operating system you want, you can just turn on and you can use it. So with this hypervisors, it is very easy to integrate or to run all your operating systems into a single platform. So the types of hypervisors, there are two type of hypervisors which is used for virtualization, or you can say creating the virtual versions of the hardware or software platform. First is type 1 and second is type 2. Okay, so we are going to go in much in detail in the next slide. But as of now, you have to first understand that what is hypervisor. So in short, I'll just give you a one line definition of it. If you talk about hypervisors, this was something which is very much important, which helps you to do virtualization. Okay, this will manage your resources, it will divide your resources, it will do partitioning, it will help you to do hardware virtualization, it will help you to do software virtualization, it will allow multiple guest operating system can be of type Linux, Windows, Mac OS. Everything can run on a single host machine at a single point of time with the help of hypervisor virtualization. Okay, so this is something which is very much important, and this is something which is managed by VMM, that is a virtual machine manager, which take cares of this everything. Okay, always remember, for making your hypervisors, first you need a host machine from where you're going to create virtual version of your resources, of your hardware, of your software, and then each virtual machine which you're creating out of it is usually called as guest machine. Okay, so we are moving to the next, that is type 1 and type 2 hypervisors. So the next is hypervisor type 1. Okay, so if I talk about hypervisor type 1, this is also called as native hypervisors or bare metal hypervisor. Important here is to know the other names. Okay, I'll repeat again. Your type 1 hypervisors are categorized into two. They are also called as native hypervisors or bare metal hypervisors. This is the other words of this. Okay, so these hypervisors basically are the one which are going to run directly on the host hardware, and they are going to manage your guest operating systems. Okay, so in other words, it will take place of your host operating systems, and then your all your VMwares are going to be scheduled here to the hardware by the hypervisors. So everything here is going to be managed by the hypervisors, which is exactly same when you talk about your actual system. In your actual system, first you have your hardware. Over that hardware, you have your operating system, and then you have your softwares which are running over it. So same applies here also, but everything here it is going to be managed by hypervisors, where hypervisors are run will run directly on the hardware, host hardware, the actual machines hardware. They are going to manage the operating systems there, and they are going to take place of the host operating system and going to manage the virtual resources. Okay, so here you don't need a base server operating system, as it has a direct access to hardware resources. Base server operating system is a one which you need at some point of time when you don't have a directly access to the hardware resources. But here, since you have a direct access to hardware resources, so here you don't need a base server operating system. Okay, so mostly this type of hypervisors are used when you have your data centers, when you have your server-based environment. You are usually use this type of hypervisors. Examples are VMware ESXi, Citrix Zen Server, and Microsoft Hyper-V hypervisors. So these are the examples of hypervisor type 1, which is our native hypervisors or bare metal hypervisors. Okay. Advantage, higher performance. Why higher performance? Because here the hypervisors are directly running on the host hardware and giving you services. Okay, they are not relying on the base server operating system to do the same. They are directly connecting it. The hypervisors are directly connecting it to the host operating systems, or you can say host hardware, and it is managing the operating system. Guest operating system are one which will have multiple operating system running, like first maybe Linux, second maybe Mac, third maybe Windows. So that it is called as guest operating system, where you can have multiple operating system running at a single point of. Okay, so you can see over your screens the diagram is also there. Okay, so you have your hardwares. This is your host machine hardware. Remember this, I'm telling again and again, this is your host machine hardware. Okay, then you have a hypervisors, which is connecting your host machine hardware along with the guest operating system which you want to have or which you want to schedule. Like you can schedule your VM resources when you want different operating system. If you want same operating system, then you will have only just one machine. But here we have taken three different operating system which is connected to the hypervisor, and this hypervisor is using the actual hardware of the host machine. That is why it is called as native, that is your main or bare metal hypervisors. So next we are moving to type 2 hypervisors. Okay. So these are usually called as hosted hypervisors. And this type of the hypervisors are used when you want to perform software virtualization. Okay. So type 1 can be used in the case of hardware virtualization, and type 2 can be used in the case of software virtualization. So here your all the software applications are going to run on the top of host operating system, and all your installed applications are also going to be run on the top of your operating system. Okay. So in type 2 hypervisors, okay, it will be running from your host operating system, and it will virtualize all the software which you are going to have or which you want to do the virtualization. Okay. So type 2 will also support your multiple guest operating system, but here you cannot access the host hardware directly. Okay. Important point is that. Okay. So here you need a base server operating system, then only you can do it. So if you so example is your VMware workstation, Microsoft Hyper-V VirtualBox, and parallel desktop. So you can see over your diagram there is an hardware. Okay. Then you need a host operating system. Okay. Then you need a hard hypervisor and you need a guest operating system. So here one more thing which is added is your host operating system, because here your guest operating system with the help of hypervisors are not having a directly access to the hardware. Okay. So here you need an host operating system which needs to be virtualized, and then only your hypervisor will provide the services. Okay. So you can see the difference between the diagram. And moving to the previous slide as well. So in previous slide, you can see there was a direct access to the host hardware. So the diagram was like this. Here you don't have a direct access to the host hardware. So you need a host operating system over which your hardware is going to run. And then this host operating system will be used by the hypervisors to provide the services to the guest operating system or applications. Okay. So here is a one more, you can say, element is added, that is host operating system, which will virtualize the hardwares, and then with this virtualized hardware the hypervisor are going to run and the services will be given to the guest operating system. Okay, just go through this once everyone. So important point is here, it is also called as hosted hypervisors. It will perform software virtualization. So all your virtualization of the software, if you want to do, you can do it. So all your applications are going to be placed on the top of the host operating system. Okay, and it is going to do the virtualization of every software processes. So we have studied what is type 1 and type 2. So first we need to get a conclusion out of it, that what is best if you want to select hypervisor type. Okay. So if you talk about type 1, whenever you're looking for more performance, then you can go for this. Okay. Because in type 1, there is no middle layer. Okay. This is like you are directly working with the host hardware resources. Okay. But when you talk about hosted hypervisors, which is a type 2, which here the setup is very much simpler. Okay, you can deploy a test, you can build an environment quickly, and you can test that environment. So one of the best ways to determine like which hypervisor is best for your need, you have to compare the performance metrics. Okay, like your CPU overheads, the maximum amount of host which you require, the guest memories which you're going to require, along with the virtual processors which are running over it. So the choice is yours. Okay, but if you talk about performance, you can get more performance in type 1 rather than type 2. If you want for simple deployment, you want easy to test or build your environments quickly, so in that case you can go for the type 2. So important factors you have to always determine whenever you're selecting which hypervisor type you have to opt for. So characteristics of virtualized environment we are going to take in the next lecture. That's it for the day. Thank you everyone.